Imagine this traveller an endless white continent under a star-dusted sky where the wind erases every footprint as if the Earth is trying to forget. You didn't arrive here by accident. Something in you was pulled toward the last blank space on our map, the place we can barely touch. What if Antarctica hides secrets of Earth's first civilization sealed beneath ice, like a locked chapter of human time? Some of that ice is nearly 2 miles thick, and in places we still know more about Mars's surface than the ground beneath Antarctica's frozen armour. Beneath the silence radar hints at mountains, lakes and shapes we can't fully name, like shadows moving under a frozen sea. Stay with me, the ice does not arrive suddenly. It gathers without announcement, without drama, accumulating grain by grain until weight itself becomes a kind of memory. Standing at the edge of Antarctica, you feel this immediately, not as cold, but as presence. The wind does not rush. It circles. The ground beneath your feet feels less like land and more like something held in place by time. This is not a continent that welcomes you. It observes you patiently, as if deciding whether you belong. You are here, traveller, not because you were looking for certainty, but because uncertainty has a way of calling. There is something about the last blank space on the map that pulls at the human mind. We are drawn to edges, to places where knowledge thins and imagination grows heavier. Antarctica is one of the few places left on Earth where the question still feels larger than the answer. Long before ice ruled this land, Antarctica moved through warmer epochs. Forests once leaned toward a low polar sun. Rivers carved paths that now exist only as pressure patterns beneath miles of frozen weight. Fossils tell us this much calmly and without speculation. Leaves, pollen, trunks of ancient trees evidence that the planet remembers even when we forget. Gravity keeps those memories close, pressing them down, refusing to let them disappear entirely. What we call ice is not emptiness. It is accumulation given form. Snow falling year after year, century after century, compressing time into layers thin enough to hold in your hands. Each layer is a record written without intention. Each trapped bubble of air is a breath from a world that no longer exists. When scientists drill into the ice and raise those cores into the light, they are not extracting samples. They are lifting fragments of atmosphere sealed and waiting. I have spent nights in quiet laboratories where the hum of machines replaces conversation. Maps lie open on metal tables, their edges softened by decades of handling. Dust settles slowly undisturbed. In those moments, the work feels less like research and more like listening. The instruments do not shout. They whisper. Numbers shift by decimals. Lines curve where they should be straight. Patterns appear, then hesitate as if unsure whether they want to be seen. Human history tells us civilization began around 10,000 years ago, because that is where our tools begin to speak clearly. Stone survives, wood does not. Memory erodes faster than rock. But the planet does not measure time the way we do. To Earth, 10,000 years is a pause between breaths, a moment too brief to matter. Modern humans have existed for at least 200,000 years, and before us other forms of intelligence walked beneath unfamiliar skies. What if something lived in that pause? What if entire chapters unfolded during intervals? We no longer know how to read. Antarctica resists excavation. You cannot dig freely here. You cannot wander far. Nearly everything lies buried beneath ice sheets more than 2 miles thick pressure, strong enough to flatten mountains and patience deep enough to erase surface memory. It is a continent designed not to reveal but to preserve. Ice does not burn history away. It seals it. And yet radar speaks. Beneath the frozen surface, instruments trace outlines of valleys, ridges and mountain ranges folded into darkness. Lakes sealed off for millions of years reflect signals back to us like cautious replies. Magnetic fields behave strangely, bending where they should remain smooth. Shapes appear in the data symmetrical enough to pause, over-ambiguous enough to deny certainty. Some see only geology. Others feel something less definable. Not proof, not belief. Just the sense that absence itself has structure. Silence, I've learned, is the universe thinking. Light behaves differently here. It lingers too long, then disappears entirely. Time stretches. Days dissolve into each other. Nights turn inward. In such places, imagination does not feel like fiction. It feels like resonance. Radiation from distant stars still passes through this ice cosmic particles, older than our speakies, leaving faint signatures behind. The universe continues its dialogue, indifferent to whether we understand it. Erosion is time thinking slowly. Ice is memory refusing to let go. If civilizations rise and fall elsewhere, leaving fragments in deserts, jungles, and beneath oceans, why should Antarctica be exempt from the pattern? The planet resets itself repeatedly. Ice ages advance, seas rise, land shifts, knowledge fragments. Life begins again, unaware it is walking across buried chapters. We are not the first to inherit a quiet world shaped by catastrophe. What unsettles people about Antarctica is not what we have found, but what we cannot dismiss. It is not the presence of evidence, but the persistence of possibility. This continent does not argue, it waits. It allows myths and measurements to coexist without resolving the tension between them. Science describes what is likely. Imagination explores what remains. Somewhere beyond our reach, something ancient still moves, not physically perhaps, but as influence, as pattern, as repetition. The same cycles echo through geology, climate and history. Rise, collapse, preservation, forgetting. Antarctica has lived many lives, and the one we see now is only the most recent mask. Beneath the ice, the planet holds its breath, keeping records we have only begun to touch. Whether those records include only forests and fossils or something more remains unanswered. And that unanswered space is not a failure of knowledge. It is an invitation. In the end, traveller, it is all right to not understand. Evidence rarely arrives the way we expect. It does not announce itself with certainty or resolve the questions that summoned it. More often it appears as fragments, partial, quiet, and easy to dismiss. In Antarctica, evidence does not rise from the ground like ruins in a desert. It lies pressed beneath ice, patient, indifferent to whether we ever learn how to read it. The first clues are not human at all. They are botanical. Fossilized leaves discovered near the transantarctic mountains, their veins still visible after millions of years, tell a simple but unsettling truth. This frozen continent was once green. Forests grew here. Rivers flowed. Seasons passed. The planet's memory is consistent even when it contradicts our expectations. Antarctica was not always the place we see today. When scientists uncovered these remains, there was no mystery in the data itself. Climate models aligned. Continental drift explained the warmth. Time placed these forests far before humans existed. And yet traveller evidence has a way of widening questions even when it narrows answers. If the land could transform so completely once it could do so again, and if it could support life, then what else passed through during those forgotten intervals ice cores deepen the unease? Cylinders of frozen history extracted from depths that erase sound. And light reveal atmospheres almost 1 million years old. Tiny bubbles preserve carbon dioxide levels, volcanic ash traces of distant fires. Each layer is a timestamp written without intention. Scientists read these layers the way astronomers read light indirectly, carefully aware that interpretation is always incomplete. What the ice shows is continuity. Nothing disappears entirely. Even the briefest disturbance leaves a mark. A volcanic eruption on the other side of the planet leaves ash here. A change in solar radiation shifts isotopes. The Earth records everything, whether we call it history or not. This is where imagination begins to lean closer to science, not to replace it, but to listen more deeply. Human impact appears late in the record, unmistakable and abrupt. Industrial soot, rising greenhouse gases, a sudden signature that stands out sharply against hundreds of thousands of years of slow fluctuation. If our brief presence can leave such a clear trace, the question lingers quietly. What kinds of traces would earlier intelligences have left if they existed? And how would we recognize them? Mainstream science answers cautiously. Atmospheric records capture chemistry, not culture. Ice cores preserve air, not tools or walls. This is true. And yet evidence is not limited to what we expect to find. Sometimes it appears as anomaly values that spike without obvious cause, patterns that repeat without clear origin. Most are eventually explained. Volcanic winters, solar cycles, natural variability. But explanation does not erase curiosity, it refines it. Radar mapping adds another layer. Beneath the ice, entire mountain ranges stretch in darkness as complex as any on the surface. Valleys appear where no erosion should exist. Lakes remain liquid under kilometers of ice warmed by geothermal heat, isolated for millions of years. These are not speculations, they are measured realities. Antarctica is not a flat frozen void. It is a hidden continent. In long nights spent comparing data sets, listening to the steady hum of instruments, one begins to notice how often certainty gives way to probability. The maps do not declare meaning. They suggest relationships, lines curve, shadows form. Symmetry appears briefly, then dissolves under closer analysis. The mind trained to detect pattern hesitates between restraint and wonder. Evidence does not point directly to lost civilizations. It does something quieter. It reminds us how incomplete the visible record is. Entire ecosystems vanished elsewhere without trace until chance uncovered them. Cities once thought mythical emerge from jungle and sand. Human timelines have been rewritten repeatedly not because myths were true, but because certainty was premature. Antarctica amplifies this humility. It withholds confirmation and denial equally. We cannot easily excavate. We cannot survey freely. The continent enforces patience, and patience alters the way questions are asked. Instead of demanding answers, we begin to accept presence. The feeling that something is there, not something specific, but something unresolved. Gravity holds more than mass. It holds memory. Radiation whispers across eras. Dust settles as leftover chronology. These metaphors are not replacements for data. They are acknowledgements of scale. The universe operates on timelines that do not prioritize clarity for human minds. Some researchers dismiss speculation entirely, and rightly so. Evidence must remain evidence, but dismissal does not erase the emotional weight of standing at the threshold of what cannot yet be known. It does not quiet the sense that the Earth has lived many lives, and that ours may not be the first to leave impressions subtle enough to escape our current tools. The deeper one studies Antarctica, the more the question shifts. It is no longer did civilizations exist here, but what does it mean that we cannot be certain? The evidence teaches restraint. It teaches acceptance. It teaches the value of silence as data. You are not here observer to uncover proof. You are here to witness how knowledge behaves at its edges, to see how science does not close mystery but shapes it. Antarctica offers evidence not of lost cities, but of forgotten scale, of time vast enough to make certainty fragile. In the end, traveller evidence does not shout, it waits. And it is all right to listen without demanding an answer. The anomalies appear first as numbers that refuse to behave. Columns of data tilt slightly where they should remain, stable signals drift where models predict calm and instruments designed to measure the predictable instead return hesitation. In Antarctica, anomaly does not arrive as spectacle. It arrives as discomfort, as the sense that something beneath the ice is not fully accounted for. I remember the first time I saw those readings late at night alone with the glow of monitors and the quiet ticking of cooling systems. The room smelled faintly of dust and cold metal. Outside, the polar wind erased all sound. Inside, the data formed shapes my training told me to approach carefully. An anomaly is not evidence. It is an invitation to slow down. Beneath the Antarctic ice sheet, magnetic fields bend in places they should not. Satellites record disturbances strong enough to demand explanation. Some align with known geology, iron-rich formations, ancient volcanic structures, scars left by impacts older than memory. Others resist easy classification, lingering as questions rather than conclusions. One of the most discussed lies deep in East Antarctica, vast circular disturbance detected beneath kilometers of ice. Its size suggests an ancient catastrophe, perhaps an asteroid impact powerful enough to reshape climate itself. Such an event would leave echoes in sediment, ice, and extinction patterns across the planet. Science leans toward this explanation because it fits known forces. Nature is capable of violence on unimaginable scales, yet anomaly never exists in isolation. Around these magnetic irregularities, radar reveals subglacial landscapes that feel unusually ordered. Valleys intersect at angles too clean. Ridges mirror one another across distances that seem deliberate. Geology can produce symmetry, yes, but the human mind is wired to pause when order emerges from chaos. This is where discipline matters. A scientist learns to hold two truths without letting them collapse into belief. One truth says patterns can deceive, shadows align, noise masquerades as structure. The other truth says that dismissal can blind us to discovery. Between them exists a narrow path of attention. Antarctica complicates this balance because confirmation is so difficult. You cannot walk to the anomaly. You cannot dig freely. Ice kilometers thick stands between question and answer. Data arrives indirectly filtered through models and assumptions. Interpretation becomes an act of humility. Silence amplifies everything. When the land offers no visual reference, the mind fills gaps. A dense mass beneath the ice becomes a buried structure. A flat expanse becomes a roof. This is not foolishness. It is pattern recognition seeking resolution. The danger lies not in imagining, but in mistaking imagination for conclusion. Some anomalies vanish under closer scrutiny. Improved resolution reveals mundane explanations. Others persist stubbornly resisting reduction. They remain statistical outliers, neither explained nor disproven. In scientific language they are noted and set aside. In human language they linger. I have watched colleagues debate these signals with quiet intensity voices, low words precise. No one speaks of civilizations aloud. The vocabulary remains geological, magnetic, thermal. And yet when the room empties when charts are rolled away, the questions do not leave with them. Antarctica's anomalies matter not because they confirm lost worlds, but because they expose how little of the planet we truly understand. They remind us that Earth is not static. It is layered, scarred, rewritten repeatedly by forces that do not care about narrative closure. Gravity keeps ancient impacts pressed into crust. Heat flows upward through hidden faults. Radiation marks time invisibly. These processes leave signatures we are still learning to read. The anomalies are not messages. They are side effects of deep time interacting with matter. Still, the imagination listens. What if some anomalies mark not catastrophe but habitation? What if during warmer epochs, when ice retreated and coastlines breathed intelligence, moved across lands now erased? What if traces of that movement are not tools or walls, but subtle alterations of environment signatures too faint for certainty? Science answers carefully. There is no evidence for such claims, and this matters. Evidence protects us from believing too easily. But evidence also evolves. The history of discovery is full of absences that later became obvious. Anomaly sits at the threshold of knowing. It is where certainty thins and attention sharpens. It asks us to remain present without rushing toward meaning. In Antarctica, this patience feels appropriate. The continent itself does not hurry. At night under skies stripped of colour, anomalies feel less like puzzles and more like echoes. Not echoes of civilizations necessarily, but echoes of processes vast enough to dwarf human timelines, cataclysms that reset landscapes, ice advances that erase coastlines, silence that follows. Some mysteries wait, others watch, and anomaly reminds us that not everything unresolved is meant to be resolved now. The universe is comfortable with unfinished questions. We are the ones who struggle. You're not lost in uncertainty, observer. You're standing where knowledge meets humility. The anomalies beneath Antarctica do not demand belief. They invite restraint. In the end, traveller, it is all right to not understand. There is a strange peace in accepting that some signals are not yet interpretable. Long nights pass, with instruments humming, coffee cooling thoughts, slowing. Maps remain open, corners curling, while outside the ice continues its patient accumulation. Nothing presses for resolution. The anomaly remains not as threat but as companion, reminding the mind to soften its grip. In that softness, wonder survives without becoming belief, and perhaps that balance is the true lesson hidden beneath the ice. A lesson written not for answers, but for endurance, for attention, and for the quiet courage to let mystery remain exactly as it is, unresolved, intact, and watching alongside us. It is there when screens go dark, when footsteps fade, when sleep approaches slowly. The anomaly does not follow. It stays beneath the ice, patient, older than questions, content to exist without explanation, as the planet continues to breathe, remember and turn. Tonight the universe whispers again, and silence answers without urgency or demand. Still, silence in Antarctica does not arrive as emptiness. It arrives as weight settling slowly across the senses until sound itself feels unnecessary. The horizon stretches without interruption, ice meeting sky, in a line so clean it feels intentional. Nothing rushes here. Even the wind moves with restraint, circling rather than striking, as if the land has taught it patience over millions of years. This silence is not passive. It watches, it listens, it holds. Standing on the ice, one becomes aware that noise belongs to living things, while silence belongs to time. Antarctica does not react to your presence. It allows you to exist briefly within it, unchanged by your arrival and untouched by your departure. I learned this during nights when the instruments recorded nothing unusual. No alerts, no deviations, no signals demanding attention. Only steady lines and expected values repeating hour after hour. At first, this absence of change felt unsettling, like waiting for a message that never came. Over time, it became calming. The data was not empty, it was complete. Silence is the universe thinking. Beneath the ice landscapes remain suspended in darkness. Mountains taller than cities lie flattened by pressure. Valleys curve through stone where water once flowed freely. These places are not erased. They are preserved, held in place by cold and gravity sealed, not to hide them, but to keep them intact. Ice becomes memory given form. Snow falls, compresses, hardens, and remembers. Each layer presses down on the one before it, carrying the weight of years without judgment. Air becomes artifact. Dust becomes chronology. Radiation passes through, quietly leaving signatures too faint for casual notice, but precise enough to endure. Silence governs this preservation. Sound would disturb. Movement would alter. Stillness allows continuity. The continent seems designed to protect what it holds by refusing to engage with the present. In laboratories, far from the ice, silence takes a gentler shape. It lives in long corridors after midnight in the pause, before a conclusion that does not arrive. Maps lie open their edges, softened by handling. Coffee cools untouched. Silence offers space where uncertainty can remain without being treated as failure. We often imagine that if something extraordinary existed beneath Antarctica, silence would betray it. That secrets demand sound, that importance announces itself. But silence does not reveal. It absorbs. It allows possibilities to exist without collapsing them into belief or dismissal. This is why myths survive here. Buried cities, forgotten civilizations, hidden structures beneath the ice. These ideas persist not because evidence insists upon them, but because silence does not contradict them. It neither confirms nor denies. It creates room. Yet silence is also a scientific discipline. It appears in cautious language, in margins of error, in phrases like "not yet understood." It marks the boundary where honesty replaces certainty. Antarctica enforces this discipline by stripping away distraction. There is nothing here to persuade or impress, only scale and restraint. Some nights, listening to wind skim across the ice, it becomes clear that silence carries history without hierarchy. Volcanic fire, cosmic impact, shifting poles, advancing glaciers. All are held equally. The planet does not rank events by importance. It records them, then continues. If civilizations once rose and fell elsewhere, silence would have followed them too. Not as punishment, but as continuation. The earth does not mourn. It transforms. Silence is the medium through which transformation becomes bearable to observe. You are not here to solve silence, traveller. You are here to rest within it. As days pass without revelation, silence begins to feel protective. It shields the mind from urgency. It reminds us that knowledge is not conquest, but relationship. Some understanding arrives slowly. Some never arrives at all. Antarctica offers no answers because it offers perspective instead. It shows how little depends on our interpretations. Ice will continue to move whether or not we assign meaning. Silence will remain long after our questions fade. Some mysteries wait, others watch. Tonight the universe whispers again, and silence listens, holding everything without the need to explain, endure, or resolve. Silence also reshapes the self. Extended exposure to it alters perception, slowing thought, until curiosity softens. The mind mirrors the landscape wide and unhurried, accepting gaps without anxiety. Questions no longer demand answers. They simply exist suspended like ice crystals in still air. There is a humility that grows here, not forced but inevitable. Faced with scale so immense, personal timelines dissolve. A lifetime becomes a brief vibration, a momentary ripple across a surface that quickly smooths itself again. Antarctica does not resist this realization. It allows it to settle naturally without emphasis. Silence teaches endurance. Ice shelves fracture not with noise but with patience. Stress accumulating quietly until release becomes unavoidable. Collapse is not sudden violence, but the end of a long calculation. Systems appear stable until they are not. This awareness lingers. Silence is not empty of warning. It delivers its message slowly without alarm. The continent shows how change announces itself long after the process has begun. By the time sound arrives, transformation is complete. In this way, silence becomes instruction. It advises restraint, attentiveness, and respect for processes beyond perception. It suggests survival depends not on domination but on listening deeply and acting cautiously. Somewhere beyond our reach, something ancient still moves, not as an object or being, but as momentum. Climate cycles, orbital rhythms, gravitational balances. These forces operate quietly, indifferent to narrative. Silence is how they pass unnoticed. As night deepens and thought loosens its grip, silence feels less like absence and more like shelter. A place where the mind can rest without needing to resolve the unfinished. Antarctica offers this rest freely. Sleep, traveller. The ice will keep its memories. The universe will continue its quiet work. And silence will remain steady and patient as dreaming begins. Tonight nothing else is required. Here, the forgotten epoch does not announce itself in dates or names. It exists between margins in stretches of time too wide for memory to hold, and too quiet for myth to preserve accurately. Antarctica, more than any other place on Earth, seems built to cradle such epochs, eras that passed without witnesses, and left behind only subtle signatures pressed into stone, ice, and gravity. Long before ice claimed the continent, Antarctica moved through climates that feel almost impossible to imagine now. Forests grew where glaciers tower, rivers traced paths that today exist only as pressure shadows beneath frozen weight. Fossils confirm this without hesitation. Leaves, roots, pollen, and the bones of animals tell a story of warmth and movement. The planet was different then, and difference is the first requirement for forgetting. What we call a forgotten epoch is not empty of life. It is empty of continuity. Change arrives not as a single catastrophe, but as accumulation. Temperatures drift, currents shift, ice advances, coastlines retreat, habitats fragment. Over thousands of years, the familiar becomes unrecognizable. Over millions, it vanishes entirely. Memory does not survive such transitions intact. Human history occupies only a thin layer near the surface of time. Beneath it lie vast intervals that never learn to speak our language. Antarctica forces confrontation with this imbalance. It reminds us that Earth does not organize itself around our timelines or our categories of significance. The forgotten epoch is where speculation begins carefully, not recklessly. It asks not what we want to find, but what could have existed without leaving obvious traces. Civilizations, as we imagine them, require continuity, infrastructure, and narrative persistence. But intelligence does not always announce itself in stone or metal. Some forms leave marks too subtle for certainty. Ice erases without destroying. It presses landscapes, flat seals, coastlines, and buries valleys without scattering their contents. This makes Antarctica unique. Other continents expose their past through erosion. Antarctica conceals it through preservation. The result is not absence but inaccessibility. I have traced ancient climate reconstructions late into the night following lines that curve gently across time. Each line represents temperature atmospheric composition or solar input. Together they reveal epochs that lasted longer than human civilization has existed. During some of these intervals, the planet stabilized into conditions favorable for complexity. That realization lingers. Mainstream science insists correctly that humans did not exist during Antarctica's warmest eras. This is supported by fossil and genetic records. But the forgotten epoch does not require human presence to provoke reflection. It asks a broader question. How many forms of intelligence or organization might have arisen and vanished without fitting our definitions? The universe produces complexity readily. Stars organize matter into planets. Chemistry organizes atoms into life. Life organizes itself into systems that adapt, explore, and sometimes collapse. Earth has hosted this process repeatedly. Antarctica is evidence not of exception but of repetition. The forgotten epoch also includes intervals closer to us, times when humans existed but left a little behind. Small populations, transient cultures' knowledge carried orally rather than materially. These leave almost no archaeological footprint. When climate resets, landscapes such traces vanish completely. Ice is particularly efficient at this. Silence protects these epochs from distortion. Without ruins to argue over, they remain ambiguous. This ambiguity is not weakness, it is honesty. It reflects the limits of inference and the dangers of certainty where evidence cannot reach. You are not meant to reconstruct the forgotten epoch, traveller. You are meant to feel its scale. There is a strange peace in acknowledging that most of Earth's history unfolded without observers. Events happened without being recorded, understood, or remembered. The planet does not require witnesses to exist meaningfully. This realization softens the urge to dominate the past with narrative. Antarctica becomes a symbol of this truth. It stands as a continent defined less by what we know than by what we cannot access. Its forgotten epochs are not hidden maliciously, they are simply beyond reach. Sometimes speculation imagines advanced societies thriving briefly before being erased by ice or catastrophe. Science does not support this directly, but it does support the broader pattern of sudden change and long forgetting. That pattern alone is enough to unsettle assumptions about permanence. Civilizations elsewhere have risen and fallen within historical time. Cities collapse, languages vanish, knowledge fragments. Multiply that fragility across millions of years, and the forgotten epoch becomes inevitable rather than extraordinary. In the forgotten epoch, gravity acts as archivist. Radiation whispers through layers. Dust settles as leftover chronology. These processes preserve without explaining. They allow fragments to exist without interpretation. Antarctica does not ask us to believe in lost worlds. It asks us to respect the depth of time, to recognize that our story occupies only a narrow band between vast silences. Somewhere beyond our reach, something ancient still moves, not as a culture or species, but as momentum. Climate cycles, orbital rhythms, tectonic drift. These forces shape epochs without concern for memory. You are not lost in this realization. You are placed within it. As thought slows, the forgotten epoch feels less threatening. It becomes a reminder that not all meaning requires recovery. Some value lies in acceptance, in allowing the past to remain past without forcing it into familiarity. In the end, traveller, it is all right to not understand. Forgotten epochs do not ask to be remembered. They ask only to be acknowledged as part of a planet far older, quieter, and more patient than we are. Tonight the universe whispers again, and the forgotten epoch listens complete without explanation. The reset does not arrive as a single moment. It unfolds quietly, layer by layer, until what once felt stable becomes unfamiliar. In Antarctica, reset is written into the landscape itself. Ice advances without anger, retreats without apology, and reshapes the continent again and again, erasing boundaries while preserving evidence of their passing. Planetary resets are not failures. They are mechanisms. The Earth recalibrates through cycles far larger than human lifespans. Temperatures drift. Oceans redistribute heat, poles wander, gravity continues its patient work. What survives is not what resists change, but what adapts to it or yields without protest. I have watched climate models replay these resets on glowing screens late at night. Lines rise and fall slowly and different to urgency. A stable period stretches for thousands of years, then fractures abruptly. Ice sheets grow collapse-reform. Sea levels surge, then retreat. Civilization depends on calm intervals, but the planet does not guarantee them. Antarctica is a monument to reset because it remembers every cycle. Beneath the ice lie shorelines from warmer seas, sediments from ancient rivers, scars from impacts that altered global climate. These are not anomalies. They are records of renewal through disruption. The continent exists because previous versions of Earth ended. Human history often frames catastrophe as interruption. But from a planetary perspective, reset is continuity. It is how complexity persists without stagnation. Without resets, ecosystems lock into fragile configurations. Without disruption, imbalance accumulates silently until collapse becomes unavoidable. The Younger Dryas is one such reminder. A sudden return to glacial conditions interrupted warming trends and reshaped human survival strategies across the globe. Cultures adapted, migrated, or vanished. Knowledge fragmented. Memory thinned. Antarctica watched from a distance, recording atmospheric shifts without commentary. Reset is erosion thinking quickly. It is ice deciding to move. It is climate expressing stored imbalance. These forces are not moral. They do not target civilizations. They act according to physics indifferent to what stands in their path. Some imagine resets as cosmic punishments. Science sees them as thresholds crossed, feedback loops triggered, systems pushed beyond equilibrium. Antarctica embodies this logic. Ice shelves thin invisibly for centuries before collapse. Stability is not a guarantee. It is a temporary condition. You're not meant to fear reset, traveller. You're meant to understand its inevitability. Long nights with data teach patience. Watching simulations repeat teaches humility. The same patterns emerge again and again across different eras. Warmth breeds abundance. Abundance breeds vulnerability. Vulnerability invites disruption. Reset follows, then quiet, then renewal. In the aftermath of reset, silence expands. Landscapes simplify. Complexity retreats. Over time, new systems emerge from the fragments. Life does not restart from nothing. It reorganizes from what remains. Antarctica itself is the product of countless such reorganizations. Civilizations imagine permanence through monuments. The planet measures permanence through cycles. Stone erodes. Ice accumulates. Memory transfers from culture to geology. Reset ensures that no single narrative dominates indefinitely. Some theories suggest ancient societies were erased by rapid climate change. Evidence remains speculative, but the broader truth stands. Earth has reset conditions many times and will do so again. Human presence does not exempt us from participation. Reset is not destruction alone. It is rebalancing. It clears excess, redistributes energy, and restores gradients. These processes feel catastrophic from within them, but coherent from distance. Antarctica offers that distance. It stands apart, allowing observation without involvement. It shows how resets leave behind not emptiness but opportunity. New coastlines form. New currents stabilize. New climates invite different forms of life. You are part of this system, observer. Not outside it, not protected from it, but integrated into cycles older than language. Reset also reshapes perception. It slows the mind the way ice slows rivers, forcing thought to widen rather than rush. Expectations dissolve. Control loosens. What remains is awareness steady and unforced, capable of observing change without panic. Instruments eventually register the aftermath. Atmospheric signatures settle into new baselines. Ice cores record abrupt transitions as thin, dark lines. These markers are subtle but precise. They reveal that reset does not erase history. It compresses it. Antarctica holds these compressions gently. Each layer rests atop another, separated by boundaries that signify transformation. No commentary is added. The ice records without opinion. To witness this is to feel smaller, but also steadier. Reset strips illusion without cruelty. It removes excess confidence, leaving awareness intact. In this sense, reset is a teacher. Somewhere beyond our reach, something ancient still moves, carrying momentum from past resets into future ones. Orbital rhythms, solar variation, tectonic drift. These forces continue regardless of belief. There is comfort in recognizing this continuity. When responsibility feels heavy, when futures feel fragile, the knowledge of cycles offers relief. The planet has endured extremes far beyond anything recorded in human memory. Ice ages ended. Supervolcanoes quieted. Oceans recovered. Reset does not promise safety, but it promises possibility, a chance for balance to re-emerge after strain. In the end, Traveller Reset is not an ending, it is a passage, a return to balance written in ice and silence. Antarctica remains as proof that the planet endures by letting go. Tonight the universe whispers again, and the cycle turns without asking permission. Sleep arrives gently when resistance fades. The breath deepens, muscles release, thoughts no longer chase conclusions, they drift unburdened, following cycles rather than resisting them. In this state, reset becomes rest, and rest becomes understanding without explanation. Nothing more is required. The cycle continues. You are held within it, steady, small and safe, as Antarctica remains patient and unmoved. Time breathes. Ice listens. The planet remembers. The echo is not a sound repeating through space. It is a pattern repeating through time, subtle enough to be mistaken for coincidence, persistent enough to resist dismissal. In Antarctica, echoes do not bounce, they sink. They press downward through layers of ice and stone, carried not by air but by gravity, radiation, and memory. I began to understand echoes during long evenings, reviewing data that refused to settle into clean conclusions. Graphs aligned imperfectly. Curves resembled earlier curves from distant eras. Different causes produced similar outcomes. Climate pulses mirrored older pulses. Collapse followed growth with uncanny consistency. The past did not repeat exactly, but it rhymed quietly. Echoes are how the planet remembers without intention. When ice advances, it follows paths carved before. When currents shift, they return to familiar routes. When temperature crosses thresholds, feedback awakens predictably. These are not conscious choices. They are tendencies encoded into matter itself. Antarctica magnifies these tendencies. Its ice preserves transitions as thin lines darkened by ash dust, or chemistry altered by distant events. Each line marks a moment when conditions changed quickly. Each line resembles others above and below it. Echo layered upon echo waiting to be noticed. Human history contains echoes as well. Civilizations rise during stable climates and falter during disruption. Knowledge concentrates, then scatters. Populations expand, then migrate. Tools improve, then vanish. These rhythms are not unique. They're expressions of broader planetary patterns. I have traced these parallels, cautiously aware of the danger of forcing symmetry where none exists. But some alignments persist even under restraint. When climate destabilizes, societies strain. When stability returns, complexity reemerges. The echo is not destiny, but influence. Silence makes echoes easier to hear. In Antarctica, there is little distraction. Without cities or forests to absorb attention, the mind becomes receptive to repetition. Patterns stand out against emptiness. The continent becomes a resonant chamber for time itself. Echo does not imply intention or warning. It implies continuity. What happened before leaves impressions that shape what follows. Ice remembers how to flow. Earth remembers how to rebalance. Life remembers how to adapt. Memory exists beyond awareness. You're not hearing a message, traveller, you are sensing recurrence. Cosmic echoes arrive too. Solar cycles wax and wane. Orbital variations tilt climates slowly but relentlessly. Radiation from distant explosions brushes the atmosphere, leaving signatures faint yet measurable. These events are not rare. They are part of a larger rhythm. Antarctica records them all impartially. It does not distinguish between cosmic dust and volcanic ash. It layers them together, compressing vast distances into millimeters of ice. The result is a chronology written without narrative but rich with repetition. Some interpret echoes as evidence of lost civilizations, of forgotten societies, repeating familiar arcs. Science remains cautious, and rightly so. Evidence for such claims is thin. But the echo does not require lost cities to matter. It reveals vulnerability. When environments change faster than the adaptation, allows systems falter. This is true for ecosystems, climates, and cultures alike. Antarctica's ice holds countless examples of abrupt shifts followed by long recovery. The echo teaches patience through scale. In laboratories, echoes appear as déjà vu. A data set resembles one from another project another decade. A trend repeats with slight variation. Researchers learn to trust familiarity without assuming identity. Echo is guidance, not proof. There is comfort in recognizing echoes. They suggest the universe is not improvising wildly. It follows constraints, rules, tendencies. Chaos exists, but it is bounded. Patterns emerge not because someone designed them, but because physics permits them. Echo is erosion thinking repeatedly. It is gravity recalling previous arrangements. It is light tracing paths it has taken before. These processes do not tire. They do not forget. Somewhere beyond our reach, something ancient still moves, carrying echoes forward. Not memories in the human sense, but momentum. Conditions shaping conditions. Past shaping future without awareness. You are part of this echo, observer. Your presence, brief as it is, participates in cycles older than language. Carbon you release will echo in ice. Heat you generate will echo in currents. Nothing truly disappears. Antarctica does not amplify echo for drama. It preserves it for accuracy. Each layer rests atop another slightly altered, unmistakably related. Continuity expressed through difference. As attention deepens, echo becomes less unsettling. It feels like reassurance. Change does not arrive without precedent. Collapse is followed by reorganization. Silence follows noise. Balance returns altered but recognizable. Some mysteries wait, others watch. Echo bridges them quietly. Tonight the universe whispers again, and the echo answers repeating not words but structure, rhythm, and restraint. The ice listens. Time listens. And as thought slows, the echo becomes gentler reminder that existence is not isolated but connected through repetition. In this awareness, the mind releases urgency. Sleep approaches without resistance. The echo continues steady and indifferent, carrying everything forward. Echo also softens fear. When events feel unprecedented, they feel overwhelming. Echo restores proportion. It shows that upheaval has occurred before under different skies and returned to equilibrium. Not comfort, but context. Not certainty, but perspective. Antarctica offers this perspective freely. Extended exposure to echo changes listening. The mind stops seeking novelty and begins noticing continuity. Small variations gain meaning. Slight deviations matter. Attention sharpens without tension. This is how understanding deepens without force. In this state, speculation loses urgency. It becomes curiosity without demand. Whether civilizations once existed beneath the ice matters less than recognizing how easily memory dissolves and patterns endure. Echo survives where stories fail. As breath slows and muscles release, echo feels less intellectual and more physical. A rhythm beneath thought, a pulse that does not hurry, the planet breathing through cycles, the cosmos breathing through orbits, everything moving, repeating, adjusting. Sleep traveler, let the echo carry you gently. Nothing is required now. The ice will continue to remember. The universe will continue to whisper. And the echo will remain patient and precise long after drifting away. Pattern does not appear suddenly. It reveals itself through patience, through repetition observed long enough to feel intentional rather than accidental. In Antarctica, pattern is not carved by hand or marked by monument. It is layered, compressed, and preserved. Written slowly into ice that falls, settles, and remembers without awareness. At first, pattern hides behind randomness. A temperature spike looks isolated. A collapse seems unique. A recovery feels fortunate. But as records accumulate, repetition emerges. Curves echo earlier curves. Transitions mirror older transitions. The planet does not invent endlessly. It returns again and again to familiar arrangements shaped by physics rather than intention. I noticed this during long nights comparing climate reconstructions from different eras. The data sets were separated by hundreds of thousands of years, yet their shapes felt related. Not identical, not precise, but undeniably similar. Peaks softened, valleys shifted, but the rhythm endured. It felt less like discovery and more like recognition. Pattern is gravity expressing preference. It is ice choosing the same paths across hidden mountains. It is water following channels carved long before memory. Matter responds to constraints, and constraints generate repetition without awareness. Antarctica amplifies pattern by removing distraction. Without forests, cities, or visible life, the underlying order becomes easier to sense. Subglacial mountains guide ice flow above them. Geothermal heat influences melting invisibly. Forces unseen leave marks unmistakable. Human history reflects pattern as well, though we resist acknowledging it. Stability allows complexity. Complexity invites strain. Strain leads to collapse. Collapse clears space. Renewal follows. These cycles repeat across continents and cultures not because of fate, but because conditions shape behavior predictably. Science names these feedback loops. Myth names them ages. Antarctica names nothing at all. It simply records repetition at scale. Ice cores read like quiet music. Isotopes rise and fall with rhythm. Dust layers mark abrupt shifts. Long calm stretches follow disruption. These patterns persist across nearly 1 million years, indifferent to human milestones or memory. Pattern does not offer prediction. It offers probability. Knowing that cycles repeat does not reveal when the next turn arrives. It only confirms that turning is natural. Antarctica embodies this truth relentlessly. Ice shelves appear stable until stress accumulates invisibly. Collapse arrives not as surprise but as completion. You're not here to decode pattern fully, traveller. You're here to sense it. There is comfort in recognizing pattern because it reduces isolation. Events feel less arbitrary. Change feels less personal. The universe operates within boundaries even when outcomes feel dramatic. Pattern suggests coherence without intention. Cosmic patterns intersect here as well. Orbital variations influence climate with precise regularity. Solar output fluctuates predictably. Radiation from distant explosions leaves faint yet consistent signatures. Antarctica records all of it impartially, compressing cosmic time into millimeters of ice. Pattern is erosion thinking rhythmically. It is light following paths already travelled. It is memory without consciousness. These processes do not aim for meaning, yet meaning emerges through repetition. Some interpret patterns as evidence of hidden intelligence or forgotten design. Science remains cautious. Patterns arise naturally from constraint. But acknowledging this does not diminish their power. Order does not require intention to matter. In laboratories, pattern guides intuition. Experienced researchers recognize familiar shapes before explanation forms. This recognition is not mysticism. It is exposure. The mind learns repetition and responds with restraint. Antarctica enforces this discipline. There are no shortcuts, no confirmations offered easily. Pattern must be observed patiently or not at all. The continent rewards attention, not ambition. Somewhere beyond our reach, something ancient still moves following pattern rather than purpose. Climate cycles, tectonic drift, orbital rhythm. These forces continue regardless of belief. You are part of this pattern observer. Your breath mirrors tides. Your sleep mirrors night. Your thoughts follow rhythms shaped by biology and physics alike. Pattern exists within you as much as beneath the ice. As awareness deepens, pattern becomes physical rather than intellectual. It feels like rhythm beneath change, steadiness beneath motion. Fluctuation no longer implies chaos. Antarctica does not explain pattern. It demonstrates it. Ice advances, retreats, reforms. Silence expands, contracts, returns. Nothing is final. Everything repeats with variation. Some mysteries wait. Others watch. Pattern connects them quietly. Tonight the universe whispers again, and Patton answers not with words but with recurrence. Ice listens. Time listens. As thought loosens, Patton becomes gentle, something to rest within without understanding. Patton also dissolves urgency. When repetition is recognized, fear softens. The unprecedented becomes contextual. Change feels navigable rather than overwhelming, not safe but familiar. Extended attention to pattern alters perception. The mind stops seeking climax and begins valuing continuity. Small changes gain importance. Large shifts lose shock. This balance steadies thought. In this state, speculation loses sharpness. It becomes curiosity without demand. Whether civilizations once existed beneath the ice matters less than recognizing how easily memory dissolves while structure persists. As breathing slows and muscles release, pattern feels like shelter, a rhythm holding experience without judgment. Antarctica offers this rhythm freely etched into ice and silence. Sleep traveller, let pattern carry you. Nothing more is required. The ice will continue its cycles, the universe will continue its motion. Pattern will remain quiet and reliable long after drifting away. A warning does not arrive as a shout. It rarely announces itself with urgency or drama. More often, it appears as a pattern that has repeated often enough to become uncomfortable. In Antarctica, warnings are not spoken. They are layered, compressed into ice, written slowly by processes that do not care whether anyone is listening. The continent does not persuade, it records. For most of human history, warning signs were immediate. Smoke meant fire, tremors meant collapse. The danger was close enough to feel in the body. Antarctica changes that relationship. Its warnings unfold across centuries, sometimes millennia, asking the mind to stretch beyond instinct. The threat is not sharp. It is gradual, cumulative, almost polite. I first understood this while examining ice core graphs late at night when exhaustion softened resistance. The data did not accuse. It simply aligned. Temperature rose. Gas concentrations followed. Ice retreated. Seas responded. The sequence repeated not once, but many times. The warning was not that change happens. It was how quickly systems respond once thresholds are crossed. Antarctica teaches thresholds. Ice sheets remain stable for long periods, appearing permanent, even invincible. Stress accumulates quietly beneath the surface. Fractures spread invisibly. Then suddenly, collapse occurs. Not gradually, but decisively. What took thousands of years to build can fail in decades. This is not catastrophe. It is physics completing a process. Warnings are uncomfortable because they do not demand action at the moment they appear. They demand restraint before urgency exists. Antarctica's warning is subtle, precisely because it is early. The ice has not vanished. The continent still looks unchanged from a distance. That illusion of stability is part of the lesson. Instruments detect what eyes cannot. Satellite altimetry measures thinning measured in centimeters. Gravimetric data reveals mass loss without drama. These numbers feel abstract until they are connected to consequence. Melting ice becomes rising seas. Rising seas become displacement. Displacement becomes conflict. The chain is long enough to be ignored. The warning embedded in Antarctica is not about punishment. It is about response time. Earth systems do not negotiate, they react. When balance shifts beyond tolerance, correction follows indifferent to intention or effort. This indifference is not hostile, it is neutral, which makes it more dangerous. Civilizations have misunderstood this before. Archaeology records societies that ignored gradual change until adaptation became impossible. Soil degradation, water scarcity, climate shifts. Each warning arrived slowly, quietly, often dismissed as temporary. Collapse followed not because of ignorance, but because of delay. Antarctica mirrors this pattern on a planetary scale. Its ice preserves evidence of abrupt transitions triggered by small initial changes. Volcanic ash layers mark sudden cooling. Meltwater pulses indicate rapid sea level rise. These events were not rare. They were recurring. The warning is repetition. There is no villain in this story, no intention behind the process. The ice does not threaten. It responds. This distinction matters. Fear demands reaction. Understanding demands preparation. Antarctica offers the second, not the first. Listening to such warnings requires humility. It means accepting that intelligence does not guarantee control. Knowledge does not grant exemption. The laws governing ice and atmosphere apply universally. Technology may delay impact, but it does not rewrite constraint. Some nights the warning feels personal. I imagine standing on ancient coastlines, now submerged, once inhabited, now erased. I think of cities built with confidence near water, trusting stability because stability has lasted within memory. Antarctica reminds us that memory is not long enough. The continent also warns against certainty. Projections include ranges, not absolutes. Outcomes depend on feedbacks not fully understood. This uncertainty is not weakness, it is honesty. The danger lies in mistaking uncertainty for safety. Warnings lose power when framed as apocalypse. Extremes paralyze rather than guide. Antarctica does not dramatize. It accumulates evidence quietly. Its warning is cumulative, truth, not spectacle. There is also a warning about responsibility. The ice records, industrial soot, radioactive isotopes, chemical signatures of human activity. These layers will persist long after cities fade. Antarctica remembers without judgment. The record will exist whether anyone regrets it or not. This realization alters perspective. Actions feel heavier when understood as permanent entries in planetary memory. The warning is not that we will be remembered, it is that consequences will. Antarctica also warns against separation. What happens there does not stay there. Ocean currents transmit change globally. Atmospheric circulation spreads impact across latitudes. The illusion of distance dissolves under physical reality. You are not outside this system, traveller. Your choices multiplied across populations enter the same feedback loops recorded in ice. This is not accusation, it is connection. Warnings are effective only when they are heard without panic. Antarctica teaches patience. It shows that adaptation is possible when response precedes crisis. Past climate shifts did not end life, they reshaped it. The question is not survival, it is cost. In this sense, Antarctica offers guidance rather than doom. It shows how systems behave when stressed and what happens when thresholds are crossed. It does not demand fear, it invites awareness. As sleep approaches, the warning softens. It becomes background understanding rather than alarm. Knowing that limits exist does not diminish wonder, it deepens it. Fragility makes continuity meaningful. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only observed. Warnings belong to this category. They do not offer solutions, they offer orientation. Tonight the universe whispers again, and the ice answers with memory. The warning is already written. Whether it becomes lesson or echo depends on listening, not belief. Rest now, observer. Awareness does not require wakefulness. Silence carries the message forward. Above Antarctica, the sky feels closer than anywhere else on Earth. It presses downward with a clarity that strips away scale, making distance meaningless. Stars do not glitter here. They burn steadily, cold and unwavering, as if fixed into the darkness itself. The horizon curves gently, reminding you that even the largest landscapes are still small against the cosmos. I remember nights spent outside the station, breath freezing before it could drift away eyes, adjusting to a sky untouched by city light. Satellites traced slow arcs overhead, silent witnesses to human curiosity. Beyond them, the Milky Way stretched like a pale scar, a reminder that our planet is only one page in a much larger record. The sky above Antarctica carries a different weight because it mirrors the land below, vast, unbroken, resistant to ownership. Just as ice conceals Earth's memory, the sky conceals the universe's intentions. Astronomers speak of background radiation, faint signals left over from the birth of everything we know. Here, under polar darkness, those whispers feel closer, less theoretical. Antarctica teaches that sky and ground are not opposites, but reflections. Ice reflects sunlight back into space, regulating temperature. Darkness reflects inward-turning thought into something quieter, and more precise. Looking up becomes a form of listening. The sky does not explain itself. It allows observation without response. For ancient cultures, the sky was a map. Constellations marked seasons, migrations, time itself. In Antarctica, those familiar patterns distort. Stars circle without setting. Night can last for months. The usual rhythms break down, forcing awareness of cycles beyond human habit. It is unsettling at first, then calming as expectations loosen. There are moments when auroras unfold silently overhead, curtains of green and violet shaped by solar wind colliding with Earth's magnetic field. Radiation becomes visible, a whisper made luminous. It is one of the few times the sky speaks in colour. Even then there is no sound, no announcement, only motion slow and deliberate. The sky above Antarctica reminds us that Earth is exposed, protected by atmosphere and magnetism, yet constantly interacting with forces far older and stronger. Solar storms leave signatures in ice cores. Cosmic rays alter isotopes trapped in frozen layers. The sky writes into the ice just as the ice reflects back into the sky. This connection blurs boundaries. When we look for lost civilizations beneath Antarctica, we often forget to look upward. Civilizations have always oriented themselves by the sky. If anything ancient ever stood on this land, it too would have measured time by stars-watched constellations drift as climates changed. The sky would have been their constant as the ground transformed. Instruments now replace naked eyes. Telescopes track distant galaxies. Sensors monitor atmospheric chemistry. Data streams replace myth. Yet the feeling remains the same. Looking up still provokes humility. The realization that intelligence is rare, perhaps brief within an indifferent expanse. The sky also carries warning, but of a different kind. Asteroid impacts recorded in Antarctic ice remind us that catastrophe is not only internal. The universe is not passive. It intersects with Earth's history without permission. Extinctions, climate shifts, sudden resets are written in both crater and core, and yet the sky is not hostile. It is simply unconcerned. This indifference is comforting once accepted. It means meaning is not imposed from above. It is constructed quietly below. Under this sky, urgency dissolves. Time feels layered rather than linear. At night, the boundary between thought and environment thins. The mind drifts outward, following light that left its source millions of years ago. To look at the sky is to see the past directly. Antarctica reinforces this sensation. Ice preserves ancient air. Sky delivers ancient light. Past surrounds you completely. Somewhere beyond our reach, something ancient still moves. Galaxies collide. Stars are born and extinguished. None of it requires acknowledgement. Yet here we are, observers by chance, aware enough to notice, fragile enough to care. The sky over Antarctica does not promise answers. It offers perspective. It shrinks ambition and enlarges curiosity. It reminds us that survival has always depended on attention rather than dominance. As sleep approaches, the sky fades behind closed eyes, but its presence remains. It continues its motion indifferent to rest or waking. In the end, traveller, it is all right to not understand. The sky does not demand comprehension. It invites quiet witness. Let your thoughts slow like stars circling without urgency. Tonight the universe whispers again. Listen and drift. The sky also carries memory in subtler ways. Traces of ancient supernovae appear in Antarctic snow as rare isotopes, evidence that distant explosions once touched this planet gently and visibly. Even extinction events leave signatures that arrive from above, reminding us that Earth's story is braided with cosmic history, whether we choose to acknowledge it or not. Standing beneath this sky, personal concerns feel weightless. Achievements, failures, ambitions, all lose sharpness. What remains is awareness, a soft recognition of participation rather than control. This is not insignificance. It is belonging without ownership. The polar sky teaches patience. Orbits repeat. Seasons return. Even chaos follows structure. When clouds finally gather, they do not obscure meaning. They simply remind you that clarity is temporary and that obscurity has its own rhythm. Eventually cold drives you back indoors. Instruments hum again. data resumes its flow. But the sky remains unchanged, continuing its quiet labour above ice and time. It will still be there when attention drifts elsewhere, when civilizations shift, when memory fades. Sleep comes easier with that knowledge. The sky does not need guarding. It does not need interpretation. It continues vast and exact, holding its position, while everything else rearranges itself below. Rest now, listener. Let the sky do what it has always done. Hold the universe in motion while you surrender to stillness. Nothing essential is missed in sleep. The stars will remain, and the ice will remember until waking returns again. Quietly. Earth does not announce itself the way the sky does. It does not burn or shimmer or stretch into infinity. It holds. It presses upward from beneath your feet with a patience so complete that it is easy to mistake it for stillness. In Antarctica, that illusion disappears. Here, Earth feels unfinished, as if the crust itself is still deciding what shape it wants to keep. I used to think of Earth as stable. Maps encourage that belief. Borders, coastlines, elevations all frozen into certainty. Antarctica dissolves that confidence. Ice flows like slow thought. Mountains bend under pressure. Bedrock rebounds when weight is removed. Even gravity shifts slightly as mass redistributes. The planet is not fixed. It is negotiating with itself. Long nights reviewing seismic data changed how I listened. Vibrations, too faint to feel, travel constantly through the crust. Earth hums at frequencies below awareness, communicating internally without pause. Earthquakes are not disruptions. They are punctuation marks in a sentence that never ends. Antarctica amplifies this truth, because so much of Earth's surface expression is removed. No forest to distract, no cities to claim permanence, just ice rock and the evidence of motion over deep time. Beneath the ice sheet, rivers flow upward against gravity due to pressure gradients. Lakes breathe filling and draining over centuries. Earth adapts quietly. This is why speculation about lost civilizations beneath Antarctica carries emotional weight. It is not only about what might be hidden, but about how completely Earth can erase. Cities are fragile when faced with ice kilometers thick. Stone yields, metal corrodes, even memory dissolves without witnesses. Earth is not cruel in this erasure. It is thorough. It recycles material without sentiment. Continents drift. Oceans open and close. Open. What is buried is not destroyed. It is repurposed, compressed into layers that later become signals for someone patient enough to read them. I've held rock samples older than complex life. Their surfaces feel ordinary, unremarkable, yet they remember conditions that no longer exist. Heat, pressure, absence of oxygen. Earth does not forget. It transforms memory into matter. In Antarctica, Earth's memory is stacked vertically. Ice cores sediment layers, magnetic signatures align like pages in a book written without language. Reading them requires humility. Interpretation must remain tentative. Earth does not clarify itself for convenience. Civilizations often misunderstand Earth by projecting intention onto it. Disasters become punishments. Stability becomes reward. Antarctica dissolves these narratives. The planet responds only to physics. Ice grows when temperatures fall. Ice melts when they rise. No meaning is assigned. Meaning is inferred. This indifference is difficult to accept because it removes us from the center of the story. Yet it also frees us. If Earth does not judge, then responsibility becomes internal rather than imposed. We choose how to respond to knowledge not out of fear but out of awareness. Earth's greatest lesson is scale. Human time is brief. Political cycles are microscopic. Even recorded history occupies a thin slice of geological memory. Antarctica exposes this disparity without cruelty. It simply shows layers accumulating while generations pass unnoticed. Sometimes I imagine standing where Antarctica once held forests, leaves falling into soil that would later freeze, rivers carving valleys now sealed. Earth allowed those environments, then withdrew them. Not suddenly, gradually. Life adapted or moved or ended. This pattern repeats. If civilizations existed elsewhere and vanished, Earth absorbed them the same way. Tools became sediment. Structures became anomalies. Stories became myth. Nothing is truly lost. It is just redistributed beyond easy access. Earth is also resilient in ways that defy human anxiety. Mass extinctions did not sterilize the planet. Climate shifts did not end life. They reshaped it. Antarctica itself hosts ecosystems under ice and in surrounding seas. Adaptation persists quietly. Yet resilience is not comfort. It does not guarantee continuity for any specific form. Earth will endure. Civilizations may not. This distinction is essential. Antarctica teaches it without drama. When you touch Antarctic rock exposed by retreating ice, it feels warm compared to the air. Earth retains heat. It stores energy long after conditions change. That stored energy drives tectonics, volcanism, slow deformation. Earth is active even when appearing inert. Listening to Earth requires patience that modern life discourages. Data arrives slowly. Confirmation takes years. Decisions demand foresight rather than reaction. Antarctica forces this discipline. Expeditions plan years ahead for results that may arrive after careers end. This long view reshapes ambition. Discovery becomes contribution rather than achievement. Adding one clear data point to Earth's story becomes enough. Understanding accumulates collaboratively across generations. Earth does not belong to us, traveller. We belong to it. This is not surrender. It is orientation. Recognizing that relationship allows humility without helplessness. The ice will retreat or advance regardless of belief. Seas will rise or fall regardless of politics. Earth follows laws written before language. Our role is to learn their grammar, not argue their intent. As sleep approaches, Earth's presence feels heavier than the skies. It anchors thought. It slows breath. Gravity becomes reassurance rather than constraint. You are held by something ancient and patient. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only observed. Earth embodies this truth, not because it hides answers, but because its answers operate beyond urgency. Tonight the universe whispers again, but Earth listens differently. It absorbs the whisper, integrates it, and continues. Rest now, observer. The ground beneath you remains thinking, slowly carrying memory forward while you sleep. Earth's silence is not emptiness, it is continuity, and continuity is enough. Return is never a reversal. It is a recalibration, a quiet adjustment made after long exposure to scale. When you leave Antarctica, nothing looks different at first. Airports are loud, streets are familiar, people move with practiced urgency, yet something inside remains slowed as if time itself did not fully follow you back. The continent does not release its visitors completely. It allows them to leave, but it keeps part of their rhythm. I noticed this most clearly in small moments. Waiting for water to boil felt rushed. Conversations jumped too quickly to conclusions. The world seemed to demand certainty at a pace that no longer felt natural. Antarctica had taught me another tempo, one measured in accumulation rather than reaction, in listening rather than deciding. Return begins with friction. The habits of the ordinary world press against the patience learned in ice and silence. But over time the friction softens, the lessons settle. Antarctica does not ask you to live like it. It asks you to remember that other ways of being exist, quieter ways, slower ways that still carry meaning. Instruments stay behind, data continues to process. Ice cores rest in frozen archives. Yet the real return happens internally. You bring back an expanded sense of context. Problems no longer appear isolated. They appear layered, connected to systems that extend far beyond immediate cause and effect. Return also means carrying uncertainty without discomfort. Antarctica never resolves itself completely. It offers fragments, patterns, probabilities. Living with that ambiguity becomes easier afterward. Not knowing stops feeling like failure and starts feeling like honesty. I often think about how ancient travellers must have returned from distant lands before maps were complete. They carried impressions rather than measurements, stories shaped by absence as much as presence. Antarctica produces the same effect. You return with fewer answers and a larger capacity to hold questions. This shift alters how history feels. lost civilizations become less like puzzles to solve and more like reminders of impermanence. Cataclysms become processes rather than singular events. The idea of a reset stops being dramatic and becomes an inevitable part of Earth's long negotiation with balance. Return also reframes ambition. Success feels less urgent. Contribution feels more appropriate. Adding one careful observation to a shared understanding becomes enough. Antarctica teaches that meaning accumulates quietly, often unnoticed until much later. There is a gentler relationship with fear as well. Exposure to vast indifferent systems reduces the need for alarm. Risks are evaluated without panic. Threats are understood as probabilities rather than prophecies. This calm does not deny danger. It contextualizes it. When I speak with colleagues after returning, conversations drift differently. There is more listening, less assertion. Silence becomes acceptable rather than awkward. Antarctica lingers in these pauses, shaping interaction subtly. The return also carries responsibility. Knowledge gained is not private. It belongs to a continuum of observers. Sharing it requires care, avoiding exaggeration, respecting uncertainty. Antarctica resists spectacle. It asks for accuracy delivered with humility. Sometimes late at night the return feels incomplete. The memory of polar darkness surfaces unexpectedly. A sense of being watched by time itself reappears. Not as unease, but as grounding. It reminds me that presence is temporary and therefore valuable. Return does not erase wonder, it refines it. The ordinary world becomes more intricate when seen through the lens of deep time. A stone on a sidewalk carries geological ancestry. A storm echoes atmospheric cycles older than cities. Antarctica extends itself into everything once you have listened long enough. The idea of first civilizations hidden beneath ice no longer feels like a claim that needs proof. It feels like a metaphor for how much remains unseen in every narrative. History is incomplete by nature. Earth remembers more than we record. This acceptance brings peace rather than frustration. Return also deepens gratitude. Stability feels less guaranteed. Infrastructure-climate cooperation appear fragile when compared to geological patience. This fragility does not inspire despair. It encourages stewardship. In sleep, Antarctica returns most clearly. Dreams slow, landscapes widen, silence becomes textured. The mind rehearses scale without effort. These are not memories replayed. They are adaptations continuing. Somewhere beyond routine, the ice still moves. Mountains still bend. The sky still writes into frozen layers. Knowing this does not diminish the present. It anchors it. You do not come back unchanged traveller. But the change is subtle, internal, difficult to explain. It is the ability to sit with questions without urgency, to see warnings without panic, to observe beauty without possession. Return is not about leaving Antarctica behind. It is about carrying its lessons forward quietly, allowing them to influence choices without announcement. The continent does not need advocates. It needs listeners. As this journey settles, rest becomes easier. Sleep arrives without resistance. The mind trusts that not everything requires immediate understanding. Some processes continue safely without supervision. Tonight the universe whispers again, but now you recognize the tone. It is familiar. It does not demand attention. It offers perspective. Return then is acceptance. Acceptance that knowledge is partial, that memory is layered, that silence is active, that you are small and that this smallness is not a flaw. Sleep now, observer. You have returned carrying enough. The ice will keep watch. The earth will remember. The sky will continue. And you briefly awake within it, all may rest without fear, knowing that understanding is not required for belonging, and that belonging does not end when you close your eyes. Reflection is not the act of looking backward. It is the moment when scattered impressions settle into shape, when experiences stop demanding interpretation and begin offering quiet meaning. Antarctica does this slowly. Long after the ice fades from view, its influence continues to rearrange thought, as if the mind itself were a landscape adjusting to pressure that has finally been lifted. I often reflect during the hours just before sleep when the world softens and the need to perform dissolves. In those moments, Antarctica no longer appears as a place but as a condition. It becomes a way of perceiving time, evidence, and absence. Reflection. I learned is not about answers, it is about alignment. What remains most vivid is not the scale of the ice, but the patience it demanded. Reflection reveals how rarely patience is practiced elsewhere. We rush to explain, to conclude, to assign meaning quickly. Antarctica interrupts that instinct. It teaches that understanding unfolds on timelines that cannot be hurried without distortion. Through reflection, the idea of lost civilizations beneath the ice changes character. It becomes less a question of whether they existed, and more a meditation on why we are drawn to such possibilities. Perhaps we sense that our own structures are temporary, that permanence is an illusion reinforced by comfort. Antarctica strips that comfort away gently without accusation. Reflection also reframes science. Data is no longer a collection of proofs, but a conversation with uncertainty. Error margins, anomalies, and gaps are not weaknesses. They are honest signals of scale. Antarctica reflects this truth clearly because it refuses to cooperate with simplification. In reflecting on long nights spent with instruments and charts, I realize how much of discovery happens in stillness. Not in breakthroughs, but in sustained attention. Dust settling on unused maps, screens glowing quietly, notes written without expectation of resolution. These moments do not feel productive by ordinary standards, yet they are where insight matures. Reflection brings humility into focus, not the dramatic humility of insignificance, but the steady humility of participation. We are part of systems we did not design and cannot fully command. Antarctica does not diminish us by revealing this. It situates us. There is also reflection on fear. Standing near forces that operate beyond human control does not increase dread. It reduces it. Fear thrives on imagined immediacy. Antarctica replaces immediacy with duration. When danger is understood as process rather than event, panic loosens its grip. Reflecting on Earth's history preserved in ice reveals a pattern of resets that are neither malicious nor merciful. They simply occur. Climate shifts, seas rise, ice advances, life adapts or relocates. The narrative loses its moral framing and gains clarity. Reflection removes the need for blame. In this clarity, responsibility becomes quieter but heavier. Not responsibility imposed by catastrophe, but responsibility arising from awareness. Knowing how systems behave creates obligation to respond thoughtfully. Antarctica reflects this obligation without demanding compliance. Reflection also alters how the future feels. It stops being a destination and becomes a continuation. Whatever comes next will be shaped by forces already in motion. The present is not a starting point, but a midpoint. This perspective calms urgency without erasing importance. When reflecting on the silence of Antarctica, I understand it now as generosity rather than emptiness. Silence offers space for integration. It allows thoughts to lengthen, emotions to settle, and contradictions to coexist without conflict. In silence, reflection completes itself. There is reflection, too, on memory. Human memory is selective, fragile, prone to narrative. Earth's memory is indifferent and exact. Ice records without preference. This difference teaches restraint in storytelling. Not every story needs embellishment to matter. Lost civilizations, whether real or imagined, serve as mirrors. Reflection reveals that we project our anxieties and hopes onto them. They become symbols of fragility, warning, and continuity. Antarctica holds these projections without distortion, allowing them to be examined calmly. Reflection also reshapes identity. Roles tied to profession or achievement loosen. What remains is observerhood, to witness without ownership, to measure without domination, to accept that some knowledge arrives incomplete and remains that way. In reflecting on a return, it becomes clear that Antarctica is not left behind. It integrates. It influences how silence is tolerated, how uncertainty is held, how patience is practiced. The reflection is ongoing, not confined to memory. As sleep approaches, reflection slows further. Thoughts become less linear, more spacious. Antarctica's lessons do not insist on recall. They operate quietly, shaping perception beneath awareness. In the end, traveller reflection is not a conclusion. It is a settling, a recognition that understanding does not require closure. Some mysteries remain intact, not because they resist us, but because they sustain depth. Tonight the universe whispers again, and reflection listens without reply. Rest now. It is all right to not understand. The meaning will continue forming long after sleep arrives, held gently by silence, ice, and time. Reflection deepens when we allow it to touch the personal without becoming confessional. I remember tracing my finger along a crack in ancient ice, knowing it formed before any language I speak existed. That awareness did not inspire awe alone, but kinship. Matter and mind share duration differently, yet both are shaped by pressure and release. This thought returns often during reflection. There is reflection on maps too. Lines drawn to claim certainty over surfaces that are anything but certain. Antarctica dissolves those lines. It reminds us that representation is always provisional. Beneath every outline lies complexity uncontained by symbols. Reflection accepts this without frustration. Finally, reflection teaches rest. Not the rest of completion, but the rest of trust. Trust that observation is enough. Trust that curiosity does not require conquest. Trust that the universe continues its patterns without supervision. With this trust, sleep becomes an extension of reflection rather than its interruption. Silence carries what thought no longer needs to hold, and the mind drifts safely knowing that nothing essential is being lost by letting go. Reflection remains after waking as a quiet calibration. It guides choices, subtly encouraging listening before action and patience before certainty. Antarctica does not instruct us to withdraw from the world, but to engage it with softened edges. When reflection is honoured, urgency becomes discernment, ambition becomes stewardship, and curiosity becomes care. This is not withdrawal from life, but a deeper entry into it grounded in awareness that every moment participates in histories far larger than itself, and that gentleness is not weakness, but alignment with the longest rhythms of earth and sky. In this alignment, reflection continues quietly long after sleep has arrived, peacefully. Sleep does not arrive suddenly. It descends the way snow settles over land already quiet, softening edges without erasing form. In this descent, Antarctica becomes less a subject and more a rhythm, guiding thought away from urgency and toward acceptance. The mind loosens its grip on explanation and allows perception to drift unburdened by the need to resolve what was never meant to be finished. In the descent towards sleep, memory rearranges itself. Images return without sequence, ice glowing faintly under polar moonlight instruments, resting between measurements, breath fogging briefly before dissolving into cold air. These fragments no longer ask to be interpreted. They exist as textures, weightless and calm, like sediment settling after turbulence has passed. Descent is permission. Permission to stop evaluating, to stop narrating, to stop anticipating. Antarctica teaches this more effectively than any instruction. Its silence does not pressure the listener. It simply remains, and in remaining it invites the mind to follow its example. Stillness becomes contagious. As sleep approaches, the boundary between observer and observed begins to thin. You're no longer separate from the systems you have been considering. Breathing aligns with slower cycles. Thoughts stretch and fade. The distinction between inner and outer quiet dissolves gently without effort. Descent also carries a subtle release of scale. Earlier, the vastness of ice and sky felt overwhelming in its immensity. Now that same vastness feels supportive. It holds rather than dwarfs. Being small no longer feels like diminishment. It feels like relief. I've noticed that true descent into sleep requires trust. Trust that nothing essential will be lost in unconsciousness. Antarctica embodies this trust. It continues its slow processes whether witnessed or not. Ice flows, heat transfers, memory accumulates. The world does not require vigilance to persist. In this understanding, the mind relinquishes its role as guardian. There is no need to keep watch. No anomaly demands immediate attention. No pattern insists on resolution tonight. What remains unresolved will remain safely unresolved until awareness returns. Descent carries softness into the body. Muscles relax without instruction. The weight of gravity feels steadier, less insistent. The surface beneath you becomes an extension of Earth's patience. Support is given without demand. Thoughts slow further, becoming less verbal, more spatial. Concepts flatten into sensation. Antarctica's lessons no longer appear as ideas, but as atmosphere, cool, quiet, continuous. There is a moment in descent when fear briefly surfaces, not sharply, but as habit. The habit of staying alert, of maintaining control. Antarctica meets this habit with indifference. It does not reassure. It does not threaten. It simply continues demonstrating that continuation does not depend on anxiety. This demonstration is powerful. It allows fear to loosen naturally without confrontation. Sleep deepens as vigilance fades. Descent also involves forgetting, but not loss. Forgetting as in setting down tools no longer needed. Questions are placed gently aside. Curiosity rests without disappearing. The universe remains available without requiring engagement. In this space, time loses urgency. Minutes are no longer counted. Sequences no longer matter. Past and future soften into a present that does not demand definition. Antarctica exists comfortably in this timelessness, and the mind follows. As breathing deepens, awareness narrows pleasantly. Attention drifts inward, then outward, then nowhere in particular. The descent becomes complete not when thought stops, but when thought no longer insists. There is comfort in knowing that while you sleep the ice continues to remember. The sky continues to move. Earth continues to adjust. Nothing pauses because you do. This continuity is not exclusion, it is belonging. In the final moments before sleep takes hold, Antarctica appears not as ice, but as acceptance. Acceptance of limits. Acceptance of uncertainty. Acceptance of rest as a valid state of being. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only observed. Others are meant to be released temporarily into darkness where they can mature without pressure. Sleep provides that darkness gently. Tonight the universe whispers again, but you do not need to listen actively. The whisper remains whether heard or not. Silence carries it forward. Descend now, traveller. Let the weight of the day dissolve. Let the cold clarity of ice cool unnecessary urgency. Let the vastness that once demanded awe now offer shelter. Sleep arrives not as an ending, but as a continuation in another form. Consciousness loosens its boundaries. The self becomes porous. Rest spreads evenly. Descent completes itself quietly. Breath slows. Thought dims. Awareness fades without resistance. Final does not mean conclusion. It means arrival at stillness, the point where movement slows enough to be felt rather than measured. After all the ice, the sky, the warnings, the returns, what remains is not an answer but a quiet alignment. Antarctica fades as a location and becomes a state of awareness, one that lingers long after words loosen their grip. This is where the journey rests, not because it has ended, but because it no longer needs to move. In this final space, the mind understands something it could not grasp earlier. Understanding does not always come as clarity, sometimes it comes as release. The need to resolve every mystery softens. The urge to prove, to uncover, to declare certainty relaxes into something gentler. Antarctica has been teaching this all along, not through instruction, but through endurance. I think now of how small moments carried the greatest weight. Not the dramatic storms or the vast horizons, but the quiet intervals in between. A cup of water cooling on a metal table, a pencil resting on a map untouched for days, the hum of a generator steady enough to disappear into background existence. These were the moments where the lesson settled unnoticed. Lost civilizations, ancient resets, hidden histories beneath ice were never the true subject. They were invitations. Invitations to consider impermanence without fear, to imagine continuity without ownership. Whether or not such civilizations ever existed beneath Antarctica becomes less important than what the idea reveals about us. We are drawn to stories of erasure because we sense our own fragility. We imagine hidden ruins because we want to believe that something can endure unseen, preserved against time. Yet Antarctica teaches that endurance does not require recognition. Ice does not persist because it is admired. Earth does not remember because it is asked to. Continuity happens regardless of observation. This realization is humbling, but also freeing. It means meaning is not granted from outside. It is chosen quietly within. Final reflection brings attention back to the body. Breathing has slowed. Muscles have softened. The mind no longer pushes forward. In this state, the lessons integrate fully. They stop appearing as thoughts and become posture, attitude, rhythm. Patience becomes instinct. Uncertainty becomes tolerable. Silence becomes familiar. I remember once standing still long enough that the cold stopped, feeling aggressive, and began to feel neutral. The body adapted. Sensation changed. What was once discomfort became information. That memory returns now as metaphor. When we remain with uncertainty long enough, it transforms. It no longer threatens. It informs. Final also carries gratitude, not directed at any force in particular, but at the opportunity to observe, to exist at a moment in Earth's history where reflection is possible, where instruments can read ice and imagination can read meaning without demanding certainty. Gratitude without attachment is rare, but Antarctica cultivates it naturally. There is also acceptance here, acceptance that not all warnings will be heeded, that not all lessons will be learned in time. Earth's history shows this clearly, yet acceptance does not equal resignation. It simply recognizes that control is partial and influence is distributed. We participate, but we do not command. The final understanding is subtle. It is the recognition that being small within vast systems is not insignificance. It is accuracy. To see oneself correctly within scale is to be grounded rather than diminished. Antarctica offers this grounding without ceremony. As the journey settles, thoughts drift toward the future without urgency. What will happen to the ice sheets, to the seas, to the climates we depend on? These questions remain open, but they no longer demand immediate resolution. They will be answered by processes already unfolding. Our role is to observe carefully and respond thoughtfully, not to dominate outcomes. In this final quiet memory and imagination merge. Past epochs feel closer. Future possibilities feel less abstract. Time becomes layered rather than linear. You sense that history is not behind you, and the future not ahead, but that both surround the present like overlapping currents. Sleep draws nearer now, not as escape, but as participation in another rhythm. The mind prepares to step back, trusting that nothing essential will be lost in rest. Antarctica rests too, even as it moves imperceptibly. Rest and motion coexist without conflict. Final moments often reveal what mattered most. Here it is not discovery or revelation, but relationship. Relationship with uncertainty. Relationship with scale. Relationship with silence. Antarctica becomes a teacher not because it speaks, but because it allows these relationships to form naturally. I think of those who will never see the continent, who will know it only through images, data, or stories like this one. That is enough. Antarctica does not require visitation to be effective. Its lesson travels easily carried by metaphor and reflection into places far warmer and more crowded. The idea of the first civilizations hidden beneath ice transforms one last time here. It becomes a reminder that history is incomplete by nature, that what we know is always partial, that humility is not a limitation of knowledge but a feature of wisdom. Final acceptance brings calm. The need to hold everything in awareness releases. Attention narrows gently. Thoughts slow, then drift apart. The journey no longer feels like a sequence of parts, but a single continuous motion that has gradually come to rest. In this rest, there is no demand to remember every detail. The essential has already integrated. What remains will surface when needed. Sleep does not erase meaning. It allows it to settle deeper. Tonight the universe whispers again, but now the whisper blends seamlessly with breath. There is no separation between listener and sound. Awareness floats without effort. If there is one final lesson Antarctica offers, it is this: endurance does not require noise. Continuity does not require certainty. Belonging does not require understanding. These truths do not arrive dramatically. They arrive slowly like ice, forming layer by layer, unnoticed, until their presence becomes undeniable. Final does not close the story. It opens space beyond it, space where questions can rest, space where curiosity can breathe, space where the mind can release its grip and trust the rhythms that carried it here. Sleep now comes without resistance. The last fragments of thought dissolve. The body sinks into support. Gravity feels gentle. Silence feels full. Sleep, traveller. The cosmos will keep watch. Earth will remember. Ice will continue its patient work, and you briefly aware within it all may rest completely, knowing that nothing essential is required of you in this moment, and that rest itself is part of the longest story being told. And even as sleep deepens, something remains awake, not as thought, but as awareness. It is the quiet recognition that stories do not end when narration stops. They persist as atmosphere, as background hum, as a subtle shift in how the world feels the next time you look at it. Antarctica lingers this way, not demanding recall, but altering perspective gently like gravity you no longer notice because it is always present. In this final stillness, the idea of beginnings loses its sharpness. First civilizations last, civilizations forgotten epochs. Future societies yet to exist all dissolve into a continuous flow. There is no clear line where one ends and another begins. Only transformation, only rearrangement. Ice becoming water, water becoming memory, memory becoming silence. The mind no longer needs to hold these ideas actively. They settle below consciousness, where they will surface later as intuition rather than explanation. A quiet patience, a softened urgency. A sense that not everything must be named to be understood. Sleep now is not darkness, but depth. A descent into layers the way ice forms layers, each one gentle, each one carrying traces of what came before. Breath slows, muscles release. The boundary between self and world becomes porous, almost kind. Somewhere far beyond sight and sound, Antarctica continues to exist without audience. Ice shifts, snow falls, time records itself. This knowledge does not disturb rest, it protects it. And so the journey closes not with certainty, but with trust. Trust that the universe does not require constant attention. Trust that meaning does not vanish when awareness fades. Trust that even in sleep you remain part of the long, quiet process, unfolding everywhere at once. We've reached the edge of tonight's journey, traveller. Not the end of the mystery, only the place where we step back from it, the way one steps away from a frozen horizon as the light fades. Together we've drifted through buried timelines, silent ice, half-seen anomalies, and the long echo of questions that refuse to settle. Antarctica remains behind us now, still covered, still quiet, still holding more than it reveals. What lingers is not an answer, but a feeling. The sense that the past is never fully finished, that the universe does not rush to explain itself, and that silence is not empty, but attentive. Somewhere beneath the ice, memory rests without urgency. Somewhere beyond the sky, time continues its patient work. And here for a moment you are allowed to simply be present with it. There is comfort in realizing how small we are, not as a loss, but as a relief. We are brief witnesses moving through immensities that neither need nor notice our certainty. Gravity holds us. Time carries us. Meaning forms quietly without force. Some truths don't demand answers. They ask only for attention, for stillness, for rest. As the story closes for now, the mystery does not. It waits unchanged whether we return tomorrow or never. The ice will remember, the cosmos will continue, and you, observer, may let the weight of wondering loosen its grip. Rest well, traveller. The universe will keep watch.